So today we're going to take a look and see if the New York Jets can make the playoffs.
Playoffs?
So as it stands right now, the Jets are 4-7 and third in their division, and they are currently the 14th seed in the AFC. So it still is a possibility for them to run the gauntlet and finish 10-7. But problem is they are on a 4-game losing streak and they have no answers on offense. Now reports say that Aaron Rodgers wants to return to practice on December 2, but even though if he does come back, it'll still be more than likely a couple games before he does. So the Jets will have to figure out how to win a couple games before Rodgers returns. And these are the current records and seedings in the AFC. So let's take a look on how the Jets can make the playoffs. Now first off, if I was Robert Saleh, I would start Trevor Siemian. Unlike Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian actually has a positive TD to interception ratio, and is also the last quarterback for the Broncos to have a winning record after Peyton Manning retired. So I think he would be a slight upgrade, until Rodgers can return. Now the Jets are already in a pickle at 4-7. They don't necessarily need to win all their games, but that would put them in a lot better situation than if they were to lose at least one game. Now even losing 2 games, they would need everything to go their way to make the playoffs. Now good news is that they have the tiebreaker over the Broncos, who are in the hunt, and have yet to play the Texans, who are currently at the 6th seed. That's why on the Texans game here, I have a must, because of all the games on that schedule, that is the one that they absolutely need to win to have a shot at making the playoffs. Now the toughest games here are the Texans, the Dolphins, and the Browns, and all the rest are winnable games, but they do need to win those as well. Alright, so now with the Jets at 9-8, what would need to happen so the Jets can make the playoffs? Now, I do think the 5th seed will either go to the Browns or the Ravens, as the Browns have a more favorable schedule and an absolute juggernaut of a defense. And unlike the Boyle and Zach Wilson-led Jets, the Browns' offense is somewhere around mid-tier, maybe a little below, as compared to the Jets' offense, which is dead last, which is holding them back. Now, the 6th seed, I expect to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have an elite defense, which is keeping them in and winning games for them. And like the Jets, is held back by a lackluster offense, but the Steelers do have a favorable schedule and their offense is not as bad as the Jets' is. Now with the Browns and the Steelers getting the 5th and 6th seed, let's take a look on the Houston Texans on what would need to happen to keep them out of the 7th spot. Consider the Jets beating the Texans, they would need to lose 3 other games. That's why this is the most crucial game for the Jets and would allow them to get back into the playoff race and have that tiebreaker. Now there are some competitive games here that can give the Texans a run for the money, like the Jaguars, the Broncos, the Browns, and the Colts. Now that the Jets have edged out the Texans, who else would they have to edge out? Well, next up, we go to the Bills. Now, the Bills are a very talented team, and before the season were Super Bowl favorites, but they've been riddled with injuries, and Josh Allen has had turnover problems, and they've been inconsistent. And luckily for the Jets, the Bills have the hardest, if not one of the hardest schedules coming up. Now, the Bills will have to go up against Super Bowl contending teams such as the Eagles, Chiefs, Cowboys, and the Dolphins, and the Chargers that can hang in with good teams but usually come up short. And ironically enough, the 2-8 Patriots, which may seem like an easy win, well, one of their 2 wins came against the Bills earlier in the year. So it's very possible that the Bills could lose 4 of their last 6 games. So next up, we have the Colts. Now, the Colts are a mixed bag. They beat the Ravens earlier in the year and would have beat the Browns if it wasn't for some bad officiating. But they've also lost to teams like the Rams and the Saints. Now, I see all these games on here, aside from the Steelers game, being winnable for the Colts, but also losable as well. So as long as the Colts lose the next 4 out of 6, there'd be no problem for the Jets. Now, next up, let's take a look at the Broncos. So good news with the Jets, they beat the Broncos early in the year, so they have that tiebreaker over the Broncos. Now, the Broncos have been on a hot streak here of lately, winning 5 in a row to have a 5-5 record. But I think that stops with the Browns, as I don't see their offense being able to put points on the board, and I see the Browns offense doing just enough to win. And I see the Lions' high-powered offense being able to outscore the Broncos not being able to keep up. And I think they'll split the series with the Chargers to go 9-8, and the Jets having the tiebreaker will get into that 7th spot over the Broncos. Now, the Jets and all the other teams competing for the 7th seed caught a little bit of a break with Joe Burrow getting hurt, With that, I think the Bengals' playoff chances are done. They got off to a slow start with Joe Burrow dealing with a calf injury and possibly something more with his wrist, but that lack of good QB play held him back, and when Joe Burrow started becoming Joe Burrow again, they started winning games, and until Burrow suffered a season-ending injury. I'm sorry, Bengals fans, but with Jake Browning, I don't see the Bengals winning one or more 2 games the rest of this year. Now, next up, we go to the Raiders. Now, I wish the Raiders would have held on to Josh McDaniels just a little longer so the Jets could have beat them and had that tiebreaker. But even without Josh McDaniels, the Raiders are still not a good team. And facing the Chiefs twice is basically 2 losses there, so all they need to do would just lose 1 more, and that would put them out of the race. Now, last and certainly the least, the Chargers. Just kidding. Now, this is another game that the Jets had an opportunity to win, but basically shot themselves in the foot with turnovers. Now, luckily for the Jets, the Chargers have a fairly tough schedule. But if there's anything about the Chargers, they'll put up fights against good teams, but then lose the teams that they should beat. Now, I think the Chargers will lose to the Chiefs again, and possibly the Ravens, Bills, and maybe the Raiders and the Broncos. Now that, folks, is how the Jets are going to come back, and Rodgers is going to lead them to the Super Bowl. Haha. Fly, Jets, fly, baby. Just kidding. While this is a narrow pathway for the Jets, that window is closing. They need to figure out how to win games before Rodgers can return. And even with Rodgers returning, there's concerns, can the O-line protect him enough to where he does not get injured again? But this defense is one of the best, if not the best defense that Rodgers has ever had. It's a shame that he's only played 4 plays for him. And they have playmakers like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall on offense. So if Rodgers is healthy enough and they can make it, then they could possibly make some noise. With that being said, Jets faithful, baby! So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Hit that little bell for notifications. And if you're on TikTok, follow me there as well. And stay tuned for more sports and NFL content.